Welcome to the Blooming Wand podcast. I'm Emily O'Neill, evidential psychic medium, intuitive healer, and coach. Here on this podcast, I guide you on a journey of self-reflection using the wisdom of the tarot. As the moon waxes and wanes, so do our own inner tides. And as a way to honor moon cycles and life cycles, on each full and new moon, I pull 3 cards which inspire an intention and affirmation to illuminate your path. Think of them as themes to guide you as you move through coming days. So grab your journals, light a candle, and settle into the present moment. Let's delve into the enchanting archetypes of the tarot, uncovering the magic and messages they hold for all of us. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. Can you believe it's already October? How's the season treating you? How's this change in season treating you? I know that I am soaking it up. I love fall. And we've got our first new moon of autumn. And with that comes a new tarot curated intention and affirmation. This moon cycle, I used my Wild Unknown tarot deck. And we pulled the 10 of Cups, the Mother of Cups, and the 10 of Swords. Be sure to have a look at the cards to see what they awaken in you. You can do so by going to bloomingwand.com, click explore, go to the blog. You'll see a transcript of this podcast. You'll see pictures of the cards. If you'd like to receive new and full moon tarot curated insights right to your email inbox, I'd invite you to sign up for the Blooming Wand newsletter. You get lots of good resources from me, basically. Now, don't forget, do look at the cards to see what they awaken in you, because my favorite way to engage the tarot is just look at the tarot imagery and see how it speaks to you. I don't look up any card meanings. I don't really feel that we need to. The imagery really does tell the story of the archetypes, and how we interpret it can change. Nothing needs to be locked into place. It's just how you feel, how this imagery awakens something in you, and therein lies the message. And here's the message that came to me when I looked at these 3 tarot archetypes. Here's our intention. Our intuition is always trying to help us along our path. But that doesn't mean it's always easy to take its wisdom on board. Here's our affirmation. My intuition is here to support me even when it challenges my status quo. Let's break this all down. So, the 10 of Cups typically represents emotional fulfillment, happiness, and harmony in relationships. I see it as a sign of contentment and joy within family or close connections, chosen family or otherwise. It's always refreshing to see the 10 of Cups. Who doesn't want to have harmony within their closest personal relationships? And if you're looking at this card, you'll see that there are 5 cups above and 5 cups below, with these rainbow connections occurring between them within this illuminated white circle. So you see connection, you see rainbow colors, which make me feel happy, connected, thriving. It's actually a pretty pleasing card to just look at because of the symmetry that is within the artwork. Now, the Mother of Cups, so we're going to kind of break down the tarot archetypes, and then we're going to go even further with them. So the Mother of Cups, also known as the Queen of Cups in traditional decks, symbolizes compassion, intuition, emotional depth. And the Mother of Cups is nurturing, empathetic, intuitive, and often an indication of a strong connection to one's feelings and the world. So one's feelings of the world, one's feelings within themselves. It's just a very insightful, intuitive archetype. Much like the High Priestess, so I've always felt a connection between the High Priestess and the Mother of Cups. It's associated with psychic communication or intuitive communication or intuitive knowing and understanding the world on a very deep level. Now, when I look at this card, I see a swan with one wing extended forward. There are blue and red sparkly little light dots or stars in the background. The swan is placed against a dark black background, and there is a cup that she sort of got her wing going over. And I feel like that's kind of important. The wing, I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Now, the Ten of Swords signifies endings, sometimes betrayal, or a painful conclusion. And I've always associated it with a difficult situation coming to an end. It carries with it a sense of finality and a need to move forward, even when it's really hard for us to do that. And in this deck, you'll see that the card has like a bull or a horned cow of some sort that's being impaled by a bunch of swords, including through its eyes. So it's a pretty, it's not pleasant. It's kind of dark. It's intense. It looks painful. So definitely take a look. It's very much in contrast with the Ten of Cups. And I think it's super interesting that we pulled two tens, like the yummy Ten of Cups and this like really dark Ten of Swords. So what's the theme? Like, what's the message here? When I consider the story that these cards present, I see a reminder to listen to our intuition, even when it's telling us something that we would rather not know. I'm struck by the swan on the Mother of Cups stretching out a wing towards the rainbow colors of the Ten of Cups. So I pulled the cards in order of Ten of Cups, Mother of Cups, and Ten of Swords. So I look at them in that way. So the Mother of Cups, I look at it being in the middle of these other two archetypes. And I see a wing kind of brushing towards the Ten of Cups. That's what struck me. I was definitely interested in the swan stretching a wing out towards the rainbow colors of the Ten of Cups. That really stuck out to me. She's turned her back on the darker imagery of the Ten of Swords, which depicts a cow or bull being impaled with swords. And this made me feel like moving past hard times or challenging times and moving towards more peaceful, happy ones, which has been a theme for us over a couple of moon cycles, is dealing with hard times. And they do come, and they also go. I think the next thing that I want to dive into is that what came to me when I looked at these archetypes was this balancing of dark and light, head and heart, mind and body. And I feel like our intuitive self is always helping us recalibrate and reorient, guiding us towards balance and inner harmony. In other words, our intuition is always trying to help us along our path, but that doesn't mean it's always easy to take its wisdom on board. Now, I wanted to dive into some examples of intuitive nudges since we're dealing with a very intuitive archetype in the Mother of Cups, but also the Ten of Cups. And we've all had intuitive nudges, but let's break down some examples of what that can look like. So, have you ever experienced this? Has your intuition ever told you something that you would rather not know? Yeah, me too. It happens. It's definitely happened to me, and it's not always easy to take on board what our intuition is letting us know. And doubting intuition or simply not wishing to accept the gentle nudges that it offers is a common experience. And so I thought it might be nice to explore the ways our intuition can speak to us and then dive into what happens when we have a hard time accepting what it's telling us. Now, in my experience, intuition communicates with us in various, often subtle ways. And that's not to say that the messages aren't clear. They typically are pretty clear. And here are a few examples of intuitive nudges to just dive more deeply into what I'm talking about. See if any resonate with you. And my guess is you've experienced a few of them. Have you ever heard somebody say, I had a gut feeling about that? So, gut feelings can present as a strong instinctual feeling in your body, often occurring in, like, I typically feel it in my solar plexus or my stomach, sometimes my chest. These feelings tell you when something feels right or wrong. And when I ask clients to describe their intuition, this is usually the very first thing they say. They're like, oh yeah, I've had gut instincts. I've felt it in my gut. And intuition can manifest in other physical ways like tightness in the chest or a sense of just overall unease or even well being. That can also be an indication of an intuitive nudge. But many times, these sensations are your body's way of letting you know that something needs your attention. So, listening to the body is a great way to build a deeper connection to your intuitive self. Is every single thing that happens in your body an intuitive nudge? I don't know. I mean, that would be something that we could definitely explore or contemplate. So, moving on from sort of sensations in the body or gut instincts as intuitive nudges, another one are dreams. So, dreams are another method of intuitive communication. And if you've ever worked with me, especially if you've been a mentoring client, you've probably heard me talk about the importance of writing down your dreams. And many people's first instinct is to focus on what happens in the dream or the symbolism within the dream. And that's fine. These are certainly important components of dreams, but I always recommend documenting how the dream made you feel, for therein lies the message. So I'll give you some examples. Lately, I've been having a lot of dreams that have made me feel like anxious. I'm traveling to places, but I don't have the things I need to like take care of myself or my laptop to do my job. And I've left all the things that I quote need, and I can't get my work done, or I can't get myself ready for events or this or that or the other. And I've been having them a lot, and it made me realize that there's a part of me that's been feeling really unsettled and anxious. And that was sort of a way for me to get clued into that so that I can figure out what's going on there. What am I feeling concerned, worried, or anxious about? And let me tell you, in the world today, there is so much to be concerned and worried about. There's things to be happy about too, but it feels like it's been a particularly intense time. So, um, paying attention to how dreams make you feel are usually a way for you to connect more deeply with your intuitive self, and it's a guiding you towards understanding feelings that you may not recognize in your waking state. So, a lot of times people view intuition or their intuitive selves just as, I don't know, maybe a soft voice that's trying to guide them. And I think that that's true, but our dreams are part of our subconscious, unconscious, and potentially higher self. It depends on what perspective you want to take with that. And I think they can guide us to look at things that are going on in our inner world that we might not otherwise see. And I think that's one of the number one jobs of intuition, is trying to help us understand ourselves, help us see things that are going on within ourselves that we might be bypassing or pushing aside. And dreams are a great way for these things that are bubbling under the surface to come forward. So, documenting how dreams make you feel, to me, was game changing in terms of documenting my dreams. Give it a go and let me know how that works for you. Or if you like to document your dreams, share how you do it. You can send me an email, or you can drop it in the comments on the YouTube channel, however you want to go about doing that. I'd like to know. I'm always interested in what people are doing. Now, sudden insights are moments of clarity where a solution or understanding suddenly comes into your awareness is also a way that intuition can like boop pop up into your life. And sometimes these moments are examples of clear cognizance or clear knowing. So, yes, your clear senses are ways that your intuition can communicate with you. And that's right, you have more than five senses. Clear cognizance is just one of the clear senses. There's also clairsentience, which is clear knowing, where you just get these feelings and you're not really sure where they're like why they're coming up. Or maybe you do know why they're coming up. There's also like clairgustance, clairsentience, claircognizance. I think I'm probably repeating myself, but in the blog, I'll put a little snippet of what the clair senses are, but you can also just give it a quick Google. It's very easy to access those. But clair senses are really interesting, and it was definitely coming to understand them helped me understand how my intuition might be communicating with me. It also helped me to understand psychic communication, mediumistic communication, and those things. So I think they're definitely helpful. But those aha moments where you just suddenly like come into knowing, that can be your intuition. Now, I tend to lean towards claircognizance, but my other main form of intuitive communication is from a quiet inner voice or thought that guides me. And I know it's different from my mind because it feels very different from regular thoughts. And it's not anxiety, it's not anything else. It's like calm, subtle, clear, and not not coming from a place of anxiety, not coming from a primal sense. And sometimes the quiet inner voice tells me things I'd rather not know or that are hard for me to hear, but I've learned to trust it. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, not listening to your intuition and then realizing maybe that it would have been a good idea that you did is a great learning experience, and it's a great way to build trust with your intuition. It's like I remember times I didn't listen and I'm like, dang it, I wish I had, and those were big learning moments for me. So if you're having a hard time sussing out what intuition is for you, trial and error isn't a bad way to figure that out. And it does it can, I know it could probably make people feel challenged or like it's difficult, but it can also reveal that your intuition is pretty strong and steady, and that listening to it can be very helpful to you. And if it's hard for you to listen to your intuition or your inner voice, why is that? And we're going to dive into some of that later on in this podcast. Meaningful coincidences, also known as synchronicities or events that seem too perfectly timed to be mere chance, are a fun way that both the spirit world and our intuition can communicate with us. And the term synchronicity comes from Carl Jung, and he used the term to describe events that occur simultaneously and appear to be meaningfully related. He felt that synchronicity demonstrated the interconnectedness of all things, and I do tend to agree. I've experienced a lot of synchronicities in my life that have been meaningful and helpful to me and kind of helped me know that I was in the right spot or on the right path, or got me to be kind of where I truly wanted to be in terms of self fulfillment or feeling connected to my own inner light, if that makes sense. Now, there are a lot of people that will explain away synchronicities or that don't believe in that, or that really don't believe in many of the things that I'm mentioning up as far as intuitive communication. And I think that's fine. In fact, I think it's good to look at alternate perspectives on intuition or synchronicities or this type of stuff because, well, it helps us to engage critical thinking and it helps us to figure out what feels right for us. And you don't have to take my word for all of this, right? You can do some digging and diving for yourself and see what feels right for you. And don't fall into this confirmation bias trap of just looking at things that already validate what you believe. Look at things that challenge your beliefs and see what happens. Um, Again, it helps us to engage critical thinking and figure out what parts of certain belief systems or ideas resonate with us and which ones don't. And that can be an ongoing process. I know my journey of understanding intuition, believing in it, believing in synchronicities came to me through life experiences over time. And it's still evolving, and we can always change our mind about things. So just hold these ideas gently and see how they feel to you. Now, strong emotional responses to people, places, or situations that don't seem to have a clear cause is another example of intuitive communication. So, have you ever met someone and immediately had a strong feeling about them? Now, I know some people will say it's your bias or it's your judgment, and it could certainly be those things. But more often than not, at least for me, I have been able to rely on those initial impressions pretty consistently, and they've been pretty darn accurate. And it just helps me act accordingly around people. Like, do I want them in my trust bubble? Do I not want them in my trust bubble? Do I want to get to know them better? Am I going to kind of just maintain an acquaintanceship with them? Things like that. But I do feel like, people have an essence, and when they walk into a room, you can kind of feel that essence. And if maybe it's something that appeals to you and maybe it doesn't. And both are interesting things to consider and dive into. I've also had strong feelings of places And I know stories other people have told me of going to a place that they've never been, and then suddenly they have a very strong reaction to that place. An example I would give is um, I my mom told me a story of going to Pompeii in Italy, and she'd never been there, and she was really excited to go, and then she got to that place and just felt completely overwhelmed with sadness. um, it was a tragic place to be. And so I feel like even though she intellectually knew what had happened there when she went there, she feels like she had some kind of a spiritual experience related to what occurred in that place. And it was her body and intuitive senses that connected her to that connected to her to what it might have been like to be alive and during that incident and then not be alive. So these are all really interesting insights to explore. I know I've been to places, and one of them I went to Scotland, and we went to the what is that, Rosalind Chapel. I think it was in the Da Vinci Code. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. For some reason, I'm drawing a blank, but it I had an intense reaction to that place, and I felt like really dizzy and weird, and things kind of came over me, and I'm not 100% sure why that happened, but it did, and I've reflected on it, and I feel like um, there's just a lot of intensity in that space, and I think I picked up on it intuitively. A spiritual space, but a lot of different kinds of spirituality I think maybe went on there. So that was an experience that I had. So how about, have you ever met somebody and had a strong impression or feeling about them? Or have you ever been to a place and felt that you had a strong reaction that seemed to kind of come out of nowhere? And having a strong attraction or aversion to certain choices, people, or places without a logical reason can fall under the category of intuition. It could also be other things, but I always say be curious about those experiences. For example, the two that I gave you about my mother and me, I can't really explain them to you. I can tell you what happened. I can tell you how they made me feel. I can tell you that the feelings that each of us had in our respective experiences really resonated with us deeply and did bring us into a deeper understanding of the places that we were visiting, and maybe what other people over time also experienced there, if that makes sense from a historical perspective or context. So these are just some examples of intuition. There are probably more. If you have any that you'd like to share, please do. You know that I love to hear from you. But I feel like the other thing I want to add to about intuition and learning to be kind of in communion with your intuitive self is be curious about it. Having like an open mind and an open heart is helpful. I always recommend being skeptical and curious about experiences, but one of the things that I feel has really helped me is intentionally on a regular and consistent basis having quiet time alone with no technology, where you're meditating or resting under a tree in nature, but entering into a little bit of a passive or receptive state where you're not just riding the wheel of the mind, is a helpful practice in kind of connecting with the intuitive self, which I don't believe comes from the mind. Perhaps it does, I don't really know, but we'll see. I know that quiet time alone has definitely been helpful to me, and it's developed my psychic and mediumistic abilities, whether you believe in those type of skills or abilities or not. It's just an experience that I've had. Now, signs you don't like what your intuition is telling you. So we've kind of covered what intuition might look like. And I think it's different for everybody. We all have different expressions of it. And I think that's totally fine. I find it incredibly fascinating, which is why I'm always saying, tell me what your experience is like, because I'm genuinely interested. But one of the common things, and this is what I do help clients with, is what happens when we don't like what our intuition is telling us? Like, what is going on there? So now that we have a better understanding of how intuition communicates with us, what happens when our intuition tells us something that's difficult to accept? Situations like this can create a lot of internal conflict. So let's dive into some ways that one might experience this. Now, one of the number one things is we might feel a strong emotional pushback or resistance, such as fear, anxiety, or denial. And this tends to happen when our intuition points out a truth that challenges current beliefs and or challenges our comfort zone or challenges our status quo. And this has definitely happened to me. I have known some things in my life about being in a relationship with a person, and I kind of got the nudge like, this might not be such a good idea. And I just really had a hard time taking that on board at the time for some reason, even though like my intuition was telling me this wasn't good for me. I knew on some level it wasn't good for me, but I just kept doing it anyway until I didn't. But I did it anyway for quite a while. And I have to say that that inner conflict persisted for the duration of the relationship until it came to an end. And when I look back at that time in my life, I am very interested in why it was so hard for me to listen to the intuitive nudge about this partner that I was with that wasn't good for me. Um, and I've done some deep work around that. And I think that experiences like that do yield some jewels of wisdom for us. Like, why did I act that way? Why did I do that? Why did I persist in a situation that my intuition and just my general senses were telling me, this might not be so good for you? So those are things that are really helpful to reflect on. And I want to offer this too. If you have had a similar experience where you had an intuitive nudge and you ignored it and there were consequences for you and perhaps other people as well, but you just couldn't take the nudge on board or you couldn't take action when you needed to, forgive yourself, be gentle with yourself, and just reflect on that time and why you maintained the status quo and maybe didn't listen to the nudges. I know that for a long time I really thought, like, why didn't I listen? What was wrong with me? And kind of took that approach instead of a more compassionate and empathetic and inquisitive approach to my behavior. So I would offer that to you as well. Now, cognitive dissonance is something else that I've experienced when an intuitive nudge brought something to my awareness that I just didn't want to believe. Cognitive dissonance is a psychological state that occurs when we hold conflicting beliefs, attitudes, or behaviors within our awareness. So it's when something challenges one of your beliefs and you're just like, I don't know about that. Um, now the inconsistency often creates discomfort or stress, so you will feel that. And here's an example, and I kind of already mentioned it. If your intuition tells you that a relationship isn't right for you, but you deeply care about the person in question, you might struggle to reconcile these concurrent truths. So that would be cognitive dissonance. You're getting the sense something is this relationship isn't right for me, but I really care about this person. And then those things can kind of create dissonance or internal struggle. Now, a big indication that you're not liking something your intuition is telling you is if you start to feel the need to rationalize or justify something to avoid facing the uncomfortable truth your intuition is presenting. Oh my gosh, who's fallen into that trap? I know that I have. And in fact, if I start rationalizing something or like getting like I really need to justify an action, deed, or behavior, I know that's a sign like, you need to step back and think about this or feel into this. Why are you rationalizing or justifying said experience? And sometimes those things are valid. Like sometimes rationalizing things or justifying actions might be actually needed. Sometimes it's not. And I can tell you that when our intuition is presenting an uncomfortable truth, and we start rationalizing, typically overthinking and second guessing starts to enter into the picture as well, which is why I mentioned these things might create discomfort or stress. Um, And when we know we need to make a change based on an intuitive inclination or some other prompt, whether it's intuition or otherwise, it's common to experience resistance. So, all of the things that I'm talking about can relate to an intuitive nudge, but maybe a friend has come up to you and said, "Hey, why are you doing this thing?" And then all of a sudden, you're resistant. So, this can come up in other ways too, not just from intuitive nudges. And I think that's important to point out. But obviously, for the purposes of this episode, we're kind of diving into what happens when our intuition tells us something, and then resistance, rationalization, cognitive dissonance, all that stuff starts to come up. Now, some signs of resistance include downplaying the severity or importance of the issue at hand, like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. And this is essentially minimizing things or gaslighting oneself into thinking that something isn't as bad as it is. I have done this. Have you? I mean, I can think of so many times I did this, particularly when I was younger. Now, shifting responsibility to others or even blaming fate is another sign of resistance. So just notice if those things are happening. Making excuses to not address the topic at hand, denying potential negative consequences to maintain the status quo, or over focusing on the positive to avoid the negative, comparing yourself to others who are in worse circumstances, and overthinking or overanalyzing to stay in a state of indecision also indicate resistance to intuitive messages that are going to disrupt our status quo. So, making excuses, being in denial about potential negative consequences of the situation to maintain your norm, overly focusing on the positive, so kind of the opposite of denying the negative, overly focusing on the positive to avoid facing the negative is another thing. So we're just kind of recapping here. Comparing yourself to others, like, oh, so and so has it way worse than me. That can be a form of resistance or dealing with the task at hand. And obviously, we've talked about it's not deliberate maybe, but like that loop of overthinking and overanalyzing to be like, well, I have to think about it, I have to analyze, I have to do this pro and con list, I have to figure out what's going on, and doing it so long that it just becomes a tool to perpetuate indecision can also be a form of resisting maybe an intuitive message. Now, if you recognize these signs in yourself, so do I. I've done it. I think it's pretty common. It's a good indication that you may be rationalizing something. And it's important to acknowledge that your resistance can, that if you acknowledge your resistance and take steps to address the underlying issues preventing you from making necessary changes, that can be helpful. Now, on a positive side, listening to your intuition, even when it's hard, can lead to personal growth and better decision making. Just remember your intuition is often guiding you towards that which will align you to your true self or your highest good. It's not trying to trick you, it's not trying to lead you astray, it's not trying to mess up your life. It might be asking you to change, but it's a helper. Now, talking it out with a trusted friend or a professional if you feel these things going on can help you process and understand your intuitive insights better and your ability to listen to them, or why it's hard for you to listen to them. And sometimes it's easy for us to listen to intuitive nudges because we like what it's telling us. It just is sort of like we're in the flow. And then there are other times where, like I said, it's pushing up against our status quo. It's challenging us perhaps to make a change that we may or may not be ready for. So obviously, you know me, I'm always telling people wait until you feel ready to make said changes. And in the meantime, feel into why maybe you're not ready. What's that about? Now, again, remember your intuition is guiding you towards actions that align with your true self and highest good, and acknowledge the feelings that you have and take the time to reflect on what your intuition is telling you. Friends, professionals can help you, and there can be a lot to navigate, and you don't have to do it all on your own. I know um, that I've needed help navigating times where it's like I feel like this nudge, but I'm afraid. And you know what? Becoming a medium, an evidential psychic medium, was one of those nudges where I was like, well, can I do that? Should I be doing this? And but there was a lot of things that happened that led me down this path, and I look back now and I'm glad that I listened, because I do believe that um, mediums and psychics, when they're ethical, grounded, evidential, and in alignment with some solid ethics and values, can really help people. And I know that I've been able to help people by developing my mediumistic abilities, and I wouldn't be here if I hadn't listened to my intuition. Has it been a long and winding road? Absolutely. Have I always known exactly what I needed to do, like as far as mapping out a huge plan? No. But I have known in certain moments when to take action and what action needs to be taken, and I've listened and I've done it. And this whole episode is about times where that's been hard. And I think that we can all relate to it. Was it easy for me to follow the nudges to develop my mediumistic abilities? Kind of yes and no. I had a lot of fear around it, but I found a way to practice and found a safe place to learn and grow in development, where I felt like, okay, this is essentially self-development and going to help me on a personal level. Other examples include, I one time decided, this was not my intuition that told me to do this, but I was like, got it in my head that I needed to get a master's and MBA in business. This was when I was living my very corporate life, and my intuition was like, your plate's full. You have no time for this. And I remember that voice thinking, why do you feel the need to do this when you're already working too much, overwhelmed? And I don't know, I didn't listen. And I went and enrolled and got letters of recommendation and made the financial investment to go get this said MBA. And my intuition was right. It was really hard for me to get my homework done. The night classes went till 9:30 at night, and then I'd already just barely gotten off work, rushing to class, no time to do my homework. And it was true. My plate was way too full to be taking on getting a master's degree while I was working way over 40 hours a week. And um, I'll never forget that. And I did eventually drop out, and I didn't feel bad about it at all, because I remembered that intuitive nudge that said, maybe now's not really the best time to be doing that. But I learned from that experience, and I learned that my intuitive self was trying to guide me and to help me and to support me away from overwhelming myself even further. So, I bet you guys have some really good stories about when you've been able to listen to your intuition and when it's been hard to listen to it, and when it's told you things you're like, "Ah, I don't want to know that. I don't want to hear that. That's going to be hard for me to deal with, or it's going to be hard for me to make that change that my intuition is nudging me to do." So, how's it going in your world? And has your intuition ever highlighted a particular change or inner knowing that was initially hard for you to accept? Do share. I love to hear from you. So let's loop back really quickly to this tarot curated insights for the new moon on October 2nd. So we used the Wild Unknown Tarot deck. We pulled the Ten of Cups, the Mother of Cups, and the Ten of Swords. Don't forget to look at the cards. Here's our intention. Our intuition is always trying to help us along our path, but that doesn't mean it's always easy to take its wisdom on board. Here's your affirmation. My intuition is here to support me, even when it challenges my status quo. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Blooming Wand podcast, as well as the Blooming Wand YouTube channel. Take good care of yourselves, get those journals out, and I will see you on the full moon.